Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you to this fourth edition of webinar series, Notions of India, with a focus on shaping the collective future. I'd like to introduce Mr. Amit Kumar Santra from Tata Steel Tubes, the Strategic Business Unit. Amit is the Head of Business Development at Tata Structura of Tata Steel Limited. He has 14 years of experience in civil and structural engineering, predominantly in steel-based construction for industrial projects, light gauge steel frame, and pre-engineered buildings. He holds a civil engineering degree from Jadavpur University and a PGDM from the Xavier School of Management, Jamshedpur. His expertise lies in business development, new product development, ecosystem building, and project engineering and management. So over to you now, Amit.
Thank you, Anjana. Hello, everyone. Myself Amit, and I'm heading the business development for Tata Structura under the marketing and sales division of Tata Steel Tubes division. So Tata Structura was launched by Tata Steel as its long-term commitments for architects, engineering, and consultant fraternity to equip them with the new age sustainable and versatile product for steel construction. So India's leading hollow section brand Tata Structure has launched this international design competition called Notions of India for specially architects, engineers, and students as well to create a outdoor sculptures or symbol which will articulate the essence of India and its journey into a glorious future. So I welcome you all to this webinar, and it has been organized to inspire you, the best architects, engineers, and innovators like you, before you start your design process for this competition. Thank you.
As we rev up to celebrate India's 75th anniversary of independence, to bring alive the legacy of Tata Steel, Tata Structura launches its initiative, Notions of India, a seminal competition to celebrate India's journey and Tata Structura's mission to give the shape of things to come. A shape that will capture India in all its diversity, its enigma, which powers its extraordinary capability to metamorphose as we steamroll into the future such that it can stand tall while meeting the aspirations of its people. Notions of India, a design competition that brings fruition to an idea. It is a quest for an iconic, timeless symbol using steel hollow sections that will amaze and inspire. This is a call-out to our engineers, our architects, designers who are not restricted by size, our nation builders who will shape the future of the nation. Who will it be? Who will give the shape of things to come?
The aim of this curated webinar series is to bring to you the best of the best in the field of architecture and design. We hope that listening and interacting with a world-acclaimed sculptor will do just that. Our topic today is Sculpting Journey, from imagination to expression, and our speaker is Gerry Judha. Gerry is a British artist and designer par excellence who has created several sculptures across the world. His work has been included in many events, museums, galleries, public spaces, and media outlets. His most recent pieces are Jacob's Ladder at Gibbs Farm Sculpture Park in New Zealand and The Scroll at the House of Wisdom, Sharjah. An extremely relevant talk this promises to be, and I hope you all enjoy today's session. Please feel free to ask questions. All the questions will be compiled and answered by Gerry post his presentation. Over to you now, Gerry.
Thank you, Anjana. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I'm an artist. I'm a painter, sculptor, designer. I've worked on numerous productions and events, and I worked in the theatre, I worked in museums and television, film, and so forth. And I've channeled most of my work at the moment onto large-scale structures and sculptures, which I'm hoping to share with you. So if I can please start, I'll just give a bit of a background. I was actually born in India. I was born in Calcutta, and I grew up there for my first 10 years before we came to England, to London. I was educated here. I studied fine art at Goldsmiths College in the University of London, and I did my postgraduate at the Slade School of Fine Art at University College. And the minute I left, I hit the ground running, and I started working in theatre, in movies and so forth, just to build up my repertoire of design and art. So I'm really not a brand artist. I work on a numerous different media, and so I like the diversity of my practice, which inspires me more than just sticking to one thing. So I'm hoping that what I show you is just a very small amount. It's a selected projects of numerous sculptures, installations, designs, and so forth. This is an introduction. I've designed and produced indoor and outdoor public art for many years. I've done a lot of the sculptures at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. I've done 25 of them, actually, so it's been 25 years. The Duke of Richmond has always wanted me to come up with new ideas. So I've created these big sculptures which were in steel, and they were sponsored by the motor car companies. So hundreds of thousands of people see them each weekend, each year, and of course they go on to the media. I also do other works which are more contemplative works, like the sculptures, the Great Walk Emeritus sculptures at St Paul's Cathedral in London, and of course the scroll in Sharjah, and I've worked for human rights and so forth. So these are the selected works. I'm going to start, and I'm going to explain each project as best I can without taking too long on each, so please excuse me. This is the scroll, which was done for the House of Wisdom in Sharjah, the UAE. It originally was a competition, but I just presented my idea prior to the competition. The king loved it and said, no, let's just do this. So it's made of steel. It's an unraveling of a form which goes up into the air. It's a monocoque. And how a monocoque works is that we take different sheets of steel, we cut patterns of steel and weld it together to create a very rigid shape. This sculpture is 36 meters high, and nothing touches each other. They just purely spiral up into the air. And it's right in front of the House of Wisdom, which was designed by Norman Foster Architects. It's a beautiful building. It's wonderful inside, and it lights up really well at night, and right in the middle of a desert. So the whole place was completely built from scratch on sand. And this is the sculpture itself. So it's a very pure form, and it gets thin as it goes up to the top, and it stands purely on a mound of concrete, which we then covered in grass. So this is sheet steel. It starts at about 25 millimeters thick at the bottom, and it gets thinner as we go higher up. It's very heavily engineered. So all the corners are beautifully joined together, welded, and sanded down and painted. So these are different views of the sculpture. And of course, it's lovely when you stand underneath it. And these are my team working on it in the sand. That's when we just built it. Now we're beginning to work on the landscaping. This is the drawings of the sculpture. You can see it's done in different sections, which we make in the factory and then weld it together on site. So we bring each section as we come along. So the orange is one, the green is one, the turquoise and blue. And it was made, and these are the steel shapes. So the yellow, the beige, the orange, you join them together and they become monocoque. There's no internal structure whatsoever. It's purely skin. It's actually, I would say, 98% space. The rest, the structure is the skin. And that's, you will notice probably from the next few projects that I've got, that I've worked on this technique quite a lot, and it's wonderful. And with steel, it just works beautifully. This is Jacob's Ladder at Gibbs Farm Sculpture Park in New Zealand. I was asked by Alan Gibbs to come up with a sculpture. He saw one of my pieces at Goodwood and he loved it. And it's stacked steel tubes. These are very, very thick steel tubes, a 200 mil square, and it goes up to 80 mil square at the top. So I wanted to create a sense of perspective. This is 34 meters high, and there are 480 lengths of square section steel tube. They all stack on top of each other. And each layer is slightly different in length and size. And as you slightly rotate it and you weld it, you create the form. It's really quite a lovely piece, and it's one of the favorites in the sculpture park. You can see how it looks great inside the landscape. And this is the steel tubes where we join them together. So it's all very, very carefully engineered and welded. We actually had this made in New Zealand. And these are the bottom steel tubes. And this is how it looks when you start to make them in sections to take onto site. So they're all slightly twisted, and the form works very well. And it's very organic. And you can see here in this drawing, each color represents a different steel thickness, different steel size. So at the bottom, it's 200 mil square, then it goes to 180, 160, 140, and so forth, right to the top. And that's how we created the effect of perspective, and that's how we could really make it become very, very graceful. And I've done a variety of different versions of this, but this was the one the client loved the most, and is very encouraging, and we managed to get it up beautifully, and it's still there. I do lots and lots of drawings. So these are my sketches, which were the original drawings for the sculpture. They're very large drawings in charcoal. I always work with drawing. Drawing is a very big part of my practice, but I can't actually draw a line on the computer. I have people who do. But what I do is sketch and draw and make models, and my team managed to interpret it very well for me. So this is the initial sketches for Jacob's Ladder, and that's looking at it from the ground up. So I wanted to get the shape, how it would look when you're standing in the ground. So these are the original drawings. This is Mercedes-Benz, again, one of many sculptures I did for Goodwood Festival of Speed. This is 28 meters high, but the actual arch is 90 meters long. And again, another triangular monocoque. It's 160 tons of steel plate. And in the what we are displaying are two great motorsports Mercedes. One by Lewis Hamilton, and I think it was 2013, and the other one was the F1 Patron. The other one was the 1934 W25. So they were sort of passing each other. So it was a nod. This is actual. This is not a Photoshop. This is a real photograph. These are actual sculpture. And of course, the underneath was very important. So I wanted to make the structure and the way it holds the cars as elegant as the arch itself. Everything in a way in these sculptures is sort of calligraphic. I like the idea of a very simple line, something which is very graceful, something you can connect to fairly quickly. This again were my initial sketches. Here you can see the cars looked like they were crashing into each other, but then I decided to make them actually pass each other. So one's coming from the past and one is going to the future. It was a nice way of connecting it together. We do a lot of work on SketchUp, which is a way of defining the shapes and how we want it to look. So at the back is the big steel structure, almost like, I would say, like the Forth Bridge. It's massive steel tubes, which we welded onto an enormous grillage, and then the monocoque was attached to it. So from the front, you never see the back, so to speak. It's the only one very rare moment where I actually I sort of slightly cheat, but it's got a sort of structural integrity, and it's something that was absolutely critical to the way the sculpture would stand. you've got to remember that underneath are hundreds of people who live and work in the house, and of course, you know, the erection of it was quite complicated. So you can see here, what we did was we had the back structure already laid down. We had the first part of the arch at the bottom, and we lifted the main arch over the house with, I think, 3 cranes, well, 4 really, and we hoisted it all up, and everything had to be purely precision. So every millimeter counted, but my engineers are fantastic and the fabricators were really good. So you can see the scale of this. It all joined on beautifully together, painted white, beautiful piece of steelwork. And these are the bolted bits that join onto each other. So once we raised it exactly in position, it was all then bolted together by my team. And then we placed the cars on top. Sometimes we lift it with the cars, but in this instant, we thought best not to do that, as purely because of the proximity of the fixings. And that's the steel structure at the back. Enormous piece of steelwork. And all of this was only up for a week, and it was taken down and recycled, all the steel. So these are event structures. I mean, the scroll and Jacob's ladder was permanent as we can be, of course, but these are more a case of something for the Festival of Speed, for the event. And this is how the inside is, the monocoque. Now the reason we have these big beams inside was just to stiffen the steel. We try and make the steel as light as possible. So that's the big monocoques that we make in sections. We had to create a very, very careful jig so that we can get them exactly to the right shape. So steel base completely on the ground. We created a steel flat and created these upright jigs where the steel would sit, and then we'd weld the cut out pieces together. This is Porsche 2013, and it was to commemorate the 9 for Porsche. It was 50 years of the 911. Another monocoque structure, simpler, but everything comes down to a point, as thin as possible. And they look like they're racing, but the trick of this was it's basically a giant prop. You've got the central piece coming forward and the 2 side bits going back, and they prop each other up, but also sideways. So when you look at it, you think, oh my goodness, how's it going to stand? Hope it doesn't fall over. The point of these sculptures is to have a sense of danger, a sense of innovation, a sense of dynamic, and a sense of entrepreneurship, which is something I love very much. I came up with these ideas fairly quickly. They're again, very calligraphic, very as simple as possible. But the engineering is very, very complex and dynamic. And they work extremely well. We paint them often in white purely because, you know, we don't want to take away from the cars, but at the same time, the white allows the light to play with the forms much better. Of course, Porsche liked that sculpture very much. They wanted me to do one outside their factory. So this is at Porsche Platz in 2015, and these were 3 different cars which they made specially for the sculpture. They did the new one and 2 earlier ones, which these ones had no engines. All the other cars, by the way, have engines in them. They're full working cars, but these were models, full size, of course, and it's in the central roundabout outside the museum and the Porsche factory. And it was real fun to make, and it looks really well in the landscape, but not as high as the other ones. This is only about 24 meters high. And this is it at night. It's still there. It's a permanent piece, and Porsche are delighted with it, as am I. And this is, I often do hundreds of little sketch models. And so I make these out of cardboard or out of wood, and try and make it look almost like it's about to fall over. So the engineering is quite complicated. My engineers love the challenge, and I don't allow anything to have big props on them if I can. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is 2018. It was to commemorate 70 years of the first Porsche. These are 6 original cars. The sculpture is 52 meters high, and it comes right down to a point that's only 98 millimeters on the ground. So you can actually put your hands around the very bottom. It's as thin as that, no lie. And but these are held with enormous macrolide cables. So I put foundations all over. Now these cars were given to us by Porsche purely for the event. They're worth millions of pounds, and I want to make them as simple and as graceful as possible. So again, very simple shapes. This is a 6-sided monocoque. The others are 3-sided monocoques. So this was very complicated to make. And how we did it is we had the central spine on the ground, and then we fixed the cars onto the central nexus with the arms, and we lifted it up with cranes right up into the sky, over. And this was like watching Close Encounters. It was really quite fantastic. It was a beautiful day, and you can see the hexagonal bottom of that big nexus. And then my men waiting on the with the cherry picker to fix it on and bolt it directly onto the spine. And there it went, exactly precision. I love the plane going by on the top. And then we put the spike on top, just a final flourish. And that was it. As we moved away from the site. The scale is phenomenal, and it's as thin as I could get it. Quite fantastic, really. And this, again, is one of my favorite pieces in the Festival of Speed. And this is the largest sculpture I've made. And the idea was to create two forms crashing into each other. This was the original concept sketch. So you've got 3 cars coming down and 3 cars going up. So that's the way I wanted the piece to work, and we did some quick SketchUp models just to get a feel for the piece. But of course, we changed it as we went along. I think the result we did was much better, but these are the initial sketches. I produce, and my engineers with me, we produce so many different versions of it till I get it right. And I think we did on the final piece. Just to show you the fabrication elements, this is the nexus, the neck of the piece. Which was all made in the fabricators, sheet steel, all joined together. And we had ladders inside for the crew to get inside to bolt the arm. So each hexagon there are the bolt connections for each arm to go on. So this is inside the piece in itself. This is Aston Martin 2019. Again, for the Festival of Speed, they had 1 car, a monocoque piece, but very simple, almost like a wave of a hand, just to show the car zooming up into the air. This is the DB1, it's the original Aston Martin racer. And, you know, a very, very simple piece of work, but, you know, and I think it's about 30 meters high, 32 meters high. No props, no nothing. Everything is balanced, engineered with huge foundations on the ground and up for a weekend. And these are my initial sketches for the piece. And these are the engineering drawings that my engineers and fabricators work on, just to show how it's all going to connect and to work out the dynamics and the shapes. And that's the same ellipse that I work on every year at Goodwood. I'm not doing it this year, but 25 years up to now. This is the Bernie Ecclestone celebrating his Grand Prix directorship. So these are 5 quintessential cars, which I wanted to create like a spark, like a Catherine wheel, just zooming up into the air. This is a 4-sided structure of skins. Again, no internal structure whatsoever. And these are original cars, and they're worth millions of pounds each. The Connaught, Ferrari, Lotus, Mercedes, and so forth. So, and Brabham. So these are really beautiful pieces of machines, and these are my original sketches. I just like to get something as quickly as possible, and once I get it, once I hit that, I then start to work with my engineers. Very essentially for me, I like things to go from fat to thin. So there's a sense of shape to it, the sense of dynamic. And I think that's very important to the way it works. So you can see at the bottom it's bigger, but as it goes up, it gets finer and more graceful. And these are the big sheet fabrications in Littlehampton, which is not far from Goodwood. They work a lot for me. We do a numerous amount of projects together, and these are large pieces of steel, as thin as possible, which we weld together to create the shape. So everything is laser cut in the beginning. And these are the supports for each car. Each car has to be measured very, very carefully. So it's right down to the millimeter. So once a car sits on those cups, there you can see that there are little grooves, and that holds a steel belt around the wheel. So each car is held together by the wheels, nothing else. So the wheels have to be locked. We have to have the cars drained. But those are all cars originally with engines, and literally they go off and racing the next day once they're taken down. This is for Renault 2002. This is, I just want to do something with a bit of flourish. So this is a giant feather, but also a landscape for the cars to sit on top. I love making models, which is how I work up my idea, and then I send it to my engineers, and then we work a lot of it together. So at the underneath it, there's a giant steel truss, a curved steel truss, and from each nodule, there's an arm coming out at different angles and different lengths, and that's how I create the movement. And each arm is tapered, is steel tubes, gets finer and finer, so they create a sort of telescopic effect. And that's from it underneath, and then the cars sit on top. It's very, very lovely, and it's amazing what you can do with steel tubes. So hopefully the competition that everybody works on will come up with some great ideas. But this is how far you can take steel tubes in terms of something organic. And of course, you can see underneath are the supports of the cars. I decided to do a bit of color work on it, which was the blue central form that runs and creates the shape. It was a bit of a nightmare at the time to do it because much as we pre-painted it in the workshops, we had to do the final things on site, and it happened to be raining and windy, so it was a bit of a nightmare, but we managed to get it. Again, those are original Renault F1 races. The great thing about all of these projects is the client trusts me with their cars. They're absolutely, worth a huge amount of money. But there's a sense of adventure, that we do. This is Mazda. This is a giant, again, this was before the Jacob's ladder, but it was the idea of stacking steel tubes on top of each other. There are 720 beams. You needed a crane practically to lift each beam. They were really heavy. And everything twists from left to right. And I wanted to create a sense of a cantilever on top. So when you stand underneath it, you think it's going to fall on top of you, but of course it won't. But it's a lovely shape, and the cars look fantastic. And one was an original Le Mans car, but the other car, the Mazda, made especially for the sculpture. So their designers in Japan made that car specially for us. It's a beautiful car, and you can see you can see it next to the original Le Mans racer. And of course, sketches again, which is different versions of how I wanted to see the piece. I've produced hundreds and hundreds of sketches till I get it right. But sometimes you can just do one or two and you just get it right as well. So then we put it on SketchUp and manage to get the shape that we want. And once you do this, you can put it onto a DWG file and get exactly what you do on SketchUp. Sometimes it's a bit of a problem for me when I see the final sculpture up there. It's sort of, it looks exactly like the SketchUp drawing. So no surprises there in a way, but still, it's very exciting and wonderful to do this. So these are actually the scale of the sculpture in relation to Goodwood House and in relation to people. And of course, I made lots of clay models, and then we photographed them and then drew them on the SketchUp file so we get the shapes before we put it onto with the steel beams. And these are the beams being made in Littlehampton. Again, those are the bottom steel beams, and you can see how they move in relation to each other. You just created a slightly different angle, and they all vary. They're not exactly the same, so each angle varies, and that's the final bits on top. This is Land Rover, big steel RSJs. I wanted the idea that these cars can traverse any terrain. That was the idea. So it's an undulated rock, and it's 120 tons of steel. And basically, there are 3 intersecting perpendicular grids. So what I did was, I mean, we actually had someone climbing up and down to give a feeling like it was a mountaineer. These are real cars, real Land Rovers and Range Rovers up there on the steel. And this is inside. You can actually go inside, and it was really quite a lot of fun. And what we did was we created a sort of rock on the computer. And once we did that, we sliced that rock in 3 different ways, and it created the shape. So this is one of the views. So this is where the steel works on one side, but you can see how it works on all the others. And then, of course, we put them on, we do the engineering drawings, and then we make these giant rocks and put the cars on top of them. And, it works out to be very exciting. And these are the steel pieces. Each one is so, right down to the millimeter, they've got to work. So everything's cut through the computer so we can get the angles right and then weld them all together. Everything has got a number to it so that you don't mess up. But my fabricators are really, really good at this. And there are numerous amounts of these steel beams. So that was Land Rover. Back to, again, the stacking tubes, but this is horizontally. I was commissioned in Texas to make a little sculpture, and I mean little. This is only 6 meters high, as far as I'm concerned, and 7 meters, and then on top it's a mound. But they love the Jacob's Ladder sculpture, so I decided I would do something akin to it, but on a different way. I'm having it horizontally rather than vertically. So each shape is different, but it sits on the ground. So when you look at it from one side, it looks like it's just sitting on a curve on top of another curve. Very, very simple, very, very pure. And these beams start from 120 mil and they go down to about, I think, 80 mil. And these are the drawings. So we shipped them all out in sections in big crates over to Texas, and they installed it in a matter of 2 days. We had of course, they had to prepare all the groundworks and so forth, which we gave them the specifications. This is it put together at Littlehampton in the factory before we painted it. And this is it in various views, quite dramatic. And you can see from here, everything is numbered exactly. So you don't get it wrong when if you get one piece wrong, it throws everything off. Audi Goodwood Festival Speed 2010, old and new. This is a very common thread in the curatorial aspects of the Festival Speed. We like to show the past and the future. So here you've got the original Auto Union Streamliner on the left, and then the R8 going up on the right. This is what I call a whoosh, and it's very simple. It's a giant steel tube. I think it was about 60 centimeters, 600 mil diameter, and then we had these fins which we cut out and added to the side, so it creates this big sense of space and speed. The idea is lines of speed going up to the cars. These are all, again, original pieces of work. And then, of course, once you get to the top of the car, you create a bit more of a speed effect. But that's the sheets of steel, and I've made it go right up to the car. And some of them, I wanted to actually model the cars so we can have the speed lines coming right over and into the car. But I'm afraid the budget didn't allow us to do that. So we actually used real cars instead, which, would you believe, is a lot cheaper than making all of this full size. And these are the original sketch drawings. Again, very simple lines I liked it to be a curve, meeting a curve, but of course, you know, you value engineer everything, and it works out that if you have it straight lines over there, it makes it cheaper because then you don't have to roll more steel. So steel rolling, everything gets factored into the budget. So I make sure that everything works so that we meet the budget and the deadline. So it's very, very important. This is BMW 2016. These are 3 original cars. Again, with engines, everything runs. That car at the back actually ran a Mia Miglia a week before, and it had to go off to another race. So this was 77 tons, again, another monocoque. But when you see it in the ground, it actually was quite overwhelming because, you know, it looks like it is actually balancing even though we've got very big foundations at the bottom holding the steelwork up. Every piece of steel, every piece of bolt, everything is engineered to precision to make this work. So these are 3 big lines that swoop around each other to create a sense of dynamic for the cars and for the sculpture. It's an enormous piece of work. And these are the SketchUp drawings, which is exactly how I wanted to look like. This was something where it doesn't go up very high, but it was a low piece, but quite a lot of fun because it just completely cantilevered over everything. And the cantilever was very, very important. Again, fabricated together on site. And everything, what for me was that you don't show any bolts, anything. So if you look at the shapes over there, it's pure welded on and filled and joined and painted. Very important for the look of the piece. This is a Jaguar E-Type, a real E-Type Jaguar shape, but made out of big steel tubes. Each steel tube is about 4 foot, 5 foot in diameter. And I managed, these are big gas pipes I managed to get from Antwerp to the UK. And we created the shape on the computer of the E-Type. And each piece of steel, each tube is cut exactly in a precision way. So when you look at it from the side, it's the shape of the E-Type Jaguar. Those wheels are 4 meters in diameter. This was about 32 meters, 34 meters high. And it just, you know, I know it's not the beautiful skin that E-Type Jaguars have, but I wanted to make something that had a sort of sense of architecture to it as well as engineering and sculpture. So for me, this brought all the 3 elements together. And how we bolted it was that it was all bolted from the inside. So I had these are the pieces, by the way, cut out in the shape. And we, instead of using laser cut because they were so enormous, I had all the developable surfaces printed on large sheets of paper. And you can see on the left over there, the paper stuck on the steel tubes. And there's a line inside, and then we cut exactly. Everything is drilled. We drill hundreds of tiny holes right through the steel. And then my team get together with their torch, and we actually cut through that, join all the holes together to make the shapes. And that's it. That's how we get the pieces of the shapes cut in the tubes. Huge, huge sculpture. It's still actually in storage. The Jaguar wants to put it up outside the factory sometime soon. And we had to get my crew right up to the sculpture, right on top. And I lowered the man down inside each tube, and he bolted it from the inside. And that's how we did it. So we had it done in sections, brought each piece in sections and put up together. This is a Honda, again, cars, but this is giant steel tubes. But the here was great because these were elliptical steel tubes, which is very rare, and Chorus really were very keen on us using it. So they're 50 meters long, each of these tubular structures, and they're all made, they're all balanced on bearings, quite complicated pieces of work. But this was a kinetic sculpture. These are 6 Honda F1 cars, and they're original cars. And what happened is that underneath each car, underneath each of these is a motor with a little weight that's rotating around. And that weight, each of these tubes are very finely balanced, absolutely fine. You can move it with a little finger. But once you rotate these arms, it makes displaces the weight of the end, and it makes it go up and down. I'm sorry I don't have a video to show this, but you can see underneath the camel car, there's the weight, and it's slowly rotating round and round and round. And the car just goes up and down. So it looked like it was a sort of chariot race. It was quite spectacular, really, very, very gentle. You know, and of course, these are the models that I made. I made a huge amount of these models just to get the feel of the shape of each sculpture. And these are original, earlier ideas where it was more straight, but so there's a numerous amount of these models I've made, which we've kept. And it's I was showing models to clients, it shows them immediately what it's going to look like. I don't do mood boards. I don't do something where it might look like this. Something I know is going to work. So I work it with my engineers beforehand. This is a Toyota 2007. They wanted to commemorate their 75th anniversary. So these are original cars, Le Mans cars. I think maybe it's an F1 as well. And these are based on the Fukushima Torii gates in Japan. These are 1200 millimeters diameter steel tubes. And I wanted to create these arches where the cars hold the arches and the arches hold the cars. Everything is connected together. It's a sort of, in a way, a type of tensegrity structure, but held on down to the ground. So you take one of those cables off and everything might fall. These are macaloid steel cables. And that's it for real. That's up there. Giant steel tubes. And we had lights on top, lighting down at night. And of course, in different weathers, had different effects. And that's the cars underneath. Again, with cradles, you can see each car has its belt around the wheel, and everything is at a slightly different angle. Again, only up for a week, and then it goes down. But very exciting and lovely to walk underneath. It's a sense of promenade to it. And these, of course, are the inspiration for the sculpture, the gates in Japan. This is Rolls-Royce. We wanted to commemorate the RR engine. So these are giant steel structures, but it's fabric. Each of those shapes are clad in plastic fabric. And it was their 100th anniversary. So I wanted to, instead of showing cars, that's the Supermarine, 1928 Schneider Cup trophy winning aeroplane, and the Bluebird, which we brought in from Daytona, and the K4 boat. The only thing is about this one is that I actually made the boat. That boat didn't exist. They were restoring it. But I wanted to get the boat up there. So we got all the data, and my team in my studio built a replica of that boat in fiberglass, exactly to the original boat. But of course, the plane and the car were originals. That plane has been in a museum for decades, and we brought it out, very fine, aluminium structure. That was the original plane before this Spitfire. So that those wings were almost like very thin shells of radiator, where they managed to warm the wings when it flew up and didn't freeze up. This is Mercedes-Benz 2001. I took the entire ellipse in front of Goodwood House, and I created a fabric structure that went up to the 300 SL gull wing. So it's plasticized fabric, very, very simple shape, not too complicated. But lit up at night, it absolutely looked wonderful. We had it changing colors. And of course, this is very, very engineered fabric. And these are the initial models that I made for the sculpture. Lotus 2012, trefoil, again, a three-sided monocoque, very complicated to make, very calligraphic. Each one is a flat sheet metal curve, joined into 3D shapes. Very lightweight, very strong. It's a rigid, thin shell structure with no internal framework or core. What is visible is the structure itself. This is a monocoque, and it was, of course, a tribute to Colin Chapman, who was the original design and Lotus founder. And of course, they use monocoque chassis construction in automobile racing. So that was Ayrton Senna's car, Fittipaldi. These were original cars. And this is my team joining all these elements together. So you can see the lines where we bolted the outer shells, and then we take those bits off and do a final weld and clean up. So there's a lot of work to be done, but you can see at the end it's absolutely stunning, and the cars look like they're racing around this speed track. I'm really thrilled with they look like tiny toys, but they're for real. This is the real thing. And this is the different shapes, the different segments that we put together to make the sculpture work. Moving on, this is again very early Jaguar. It's cat's cradle. These are 3 cars which we held up together. Very early piece in 2000. And underneath each car, so you can look up into the car. You get to see the cars from underneath, close up. They're right over your head. But if you wanted to know about each car, what you do is you look down in a mirror, and it reflects the car, and then we print it on the mirror, the information about each car. So, of course, that was the E-Type. So the original E-Type's up in the air, and this is the sketch model that I made for the sculpture to work. Very, very complicated, but a lot of fun, and these cars were really heavy. I mean, that silk cut Le Mans car was about 1.2 tons. This is a little sculpture for Mexico. My client, Carlos Hank, he's got a collection of Ferraris. They love my sculpture, so I made a lovely little piece. Again, a monocoque with fins, and we actually made the model of each car in my studio. So this is a very fine steel work, very complicated of monocoque. These are the shapes, so you can see the big unrolled shapes on the ground, and there at the back is how they work on the sculpture. And then we fabricated it in the workshop. So that central fins are just a rig, the jig to hold the central curve. And once we have that central curve in position, we attach everything to it and take it off. And then you start getting the shape together. Very thin. This is only about 3mm sheet steel. And welded together, and of course it creates the final shape, which we primed in the workshop and then painted in red, for outdoors. And then these are the cars being modeled in the studio. We had CNC, we got the data, cut them all out, but everything then was hand rubbed, painted and finished to look like the car itself and to stand outside in Mexico in all different weathers. And thankfully, it's still in good condition, and we created it all to send everything off to Mexico. This is a sculpture I made for St. Paul's Cathedral. This commemorates the First World War, and this is a giant, the white cross is the war graves in Flanders Fields and so forth. And these are destroyed buildings showing contemporary bombed out residential blocks, in the Middle East. Of course, we know a lot of what's going on at the moment there. This is Syria, Gaza, or Baghdad and so forth, and also Eastern Europe. So it's a way of saying that, okay, 100 years after the First World War and the carve-up of the Ottoman Empire, the Sykes-Picot, we're still fighting those wars. And that's them in St. Paul's. They're still over there. So if ever you're in London, you must come and see them. They really are quite lovely. And they have got internal steel structure, but everything is made out of a card and paint and acrylic gesso. And that's them over there. So there's one on each side. It was meant to be up for 9 months, but it's been there for 7 years. And this is the human rights sculpture for Amnesty International. They always say in the early saying is, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So a central steel shaft then holds layers of wood with alcoves with flickering candles. This is a model. It actually worked. It actually flickered. We made them out of wheat bulbs. And of course, there were steel versions of this. I'm sorry. This is a bridge which goes over a river walk, which links the whole of the south bank of London. You can see it goes over the river wall, and I created a cantilever so that it cantilevers over the wall to stand over the River Thames. Of course, you can't destroy these flood walls, so you have to walk over them if you want to walk across the south bank. And that building on over there in the back is the Tate and Lyle factory, where we get processed sugar. And you can see there in the distant Canary Wharf and the Millennium Dome. And it's a very simple, elegant sculpture structure, bridge. And it's in Woolwich Dockyard. These are the different photographs of it. I wanted to be very, very sculptural. And I had to do a couple of other bridges along in Woolwich, and this was I haven't got the photograph, I'm afraid, of the final bridge, but this is the sketch model of it, where you go up and come down the other side. Just something very simple made out of steel. And this is the glass version as well. As you go up, you go inside these two walls, and as you go up, the walls lower, so you get a view over the river. And all along, you had this slotted holes where you can look through and have glimpses of the river before you reach the top. Everything works structurally and is cantilevered. And this, they're doing a number of these small sculptures inside buildings. This was to show a city like New York with all the grid lines, which I built in acrylic and had neon and acrylic buildings in it, suspended from the air. Very, very, very lovely, really. I'm going to just finish off with some of my other work, which I thought I'd show you. These are, I guess you've seen the St. Paul's Cathedral sculptures. These are my paintings. These are actually big, giant 3D paintings where I build these buildings in foam board, and then I glue them onto the canvas, and I destroy them on the canvas, and I work with them onto the detritus and what's left there. I then use with very thick acrylic gesso, and we create water towers and aerials and so forth to get the effect of destroyed cities and cables. These are the details of each canvas, and there are all different number of them. They've all gone to very big museums and collections. And that earlier one is 4 meters by 2 meters, that painting. And these are some of the other ones. And these are some of the different paintings where they're big towers, which I built, again, on cantilever on canvas. And I smashed them. And what I like to see what's inside, the holes and the shadows and so forth, is what excites me about them. And then I work with the gesso to bring them together. Some are different colors, some is oil paintings, some in acrylic. And this is blood red, of course. This is showing different parts of destruction. But this was based on Bruegel's Tower of Babel. And these are the paintings in various, this was at the Louis Blouin Foundation, where they were exhibited, some of them. There were quite a number of them. And I'm going to finish off with Bengal. This is, I was taken back to Bengal, to Calcutta, to look at climate change and my response on it. And of course, as we all know, the rickshaw is a very important part of Indian transportation and culture and so forth, and communities. So I built these rickshaws in brass. They're actually models. These are about 2-3 meters high. Some of them are, no, these are about 2-3 feet high. And they're all different sculptures. Just my response to the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. So this is sort of, even though the scroll was calligraphic about the book, this is also like a flame in the air. But these are quite lovely pieces, all made in wood, tied together with copper wire, like the sort of pandals that you have with these enormous complicated bamboo structures that support everything. So I love the intensity of that internal structures without the skin. And of course, there are different things. This is a cloud on a shore, 4 feet wide. These were the mangroves I went and looked at, which were drying out. So the roots of the tree were all exposed. So I wanted to make a very strong statement about the climate change and everything drying up. So this was a tree upside down, just exposed in the air with all its roots. And this is made out of copper tubing. And this is a splash of water, similar to the way I did the E-type Jaguar, which I created a splash on the computer and then created the tubes and then welded it all together and made a little rickshaw. So these are all models. And finally, this is the, again, this was made in bamboo, again, based on the power stations and everything tied together to create the shape. And that's it. This is, well, basically, that's my presentation of some of the projects I've worked on. There are a huge amount. You can always see them on my website. And also there are a number of articles which can tell you a bit more about everything that I've done. And even though it doesn't show every single thing that I've done, it certainly will tell you a little bit more about my practice. I hope this will inspire you. I hope it informs you, and I'd welcome any questions you might have or would like me to do anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerry. That's been an absolute delight to see all your amazing work. I have a lot of questions. That had you been a participant in this competition, how would you have gone about designing for Notions of India?
I mean, they've asked me to be on the jury. Happy to step back. There are a huge amount of people there that I'm sure have fantastic vision, talent, and I would welcome the opportunity to participate in this project, to encourage, and to help bring this to fruition. I don't have any agenda as far as working on this project, other than helping it. It's fine for me.
One of the questions is, what has been your most challenging installation?
I think everyone is pretty challenging because the thing is they all have to be different. Sometimes something very easy can be very complicated. I think I really can't say there is one most challenging. They've all been pretty challenging. I mean, there are a huge amount of projects I'm not showing you. For example, the Holocaust exhibition at the Imperial War Museum, where I made installation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And it's nothing to do with being Jewish, it's purely to do with the intensity of history and bringing that together in art form is something that I found quite challenging. A lot of my work, I'm a project artist, so I like working with projects, and I like to respond to history, to respond to contemporary issues. So everything in my work relates to a historical element. If it's a festival of speed, they're historical, cars or engineering. Of course, then you've got, things like the Holocaust. Then you've got things like climate change, and of course, conflict as well. So, everything's a challenge in a way.
Next question is, who has done the structural design of your structures and how are wind loads calculated?
Well, I mean, structural engineers, I work with a company called Dialis. I have a good relationship with the engineers there. So sketches fly to and from, driving in the motorway. Oh, God, I've got the idea. I know what to do. I'll park the car in a side road and I'll do a sketch on a piece of paper in the car and I'll photograph it with my phone and I'll email it to Bruno and Bruno will send it back in the evening, but once we establish the language that we have between us, they can then tell me, look, if you want it to be like this, it's going to be this amount of steel and this is the engineering issues. But more often than not, after working with them for so many years, I think I've got a fairly good idea about what works and what doesn't, but I have no idea about wind loads. We get, if say, for example, a piece in Texas, we worked out all the local conditions, the ground conditions, and the sculpture was in relation to that. So that's very important.
How do you understand and kind of make sure about the stability of a structure even before the actual construction begins?
I beg your pardon, what's your question?
How do you ensure that a structure that you have designed is going to be stable? Before you go into construction, how do you ensure the stability of a structure? What kind of tests?
That's worked out with my engineers and my fabricators. Everything that I've done over there, I will do sketches, but I have meetings with them early on. You see, the thing is, the client gives me a budget, and the budget, I have to make everything to the budget. So nothing goes beyond that. So I work out with my engineers and my fabricators, and they don't just work for me, they work for a number of other architects and artists and so forth. What exactly will make this thing happen in terms of the budget, and then we create it down to that. I can't ensure anything, it's up to them. That's why I engage them and pay them a lot of money.
What kind of foundation is used for these sculptures?
Big pieces of concrete, big slabs of concrete. Yeah.
Okay.
Each concrete slab is carefully engineered as well. It's not just the steel work. It's the foundations that are very engineered.
All right. There's another question where the person asks, why are you not using GFRC?
You mean fiberglass?
I think so. He has just written GFRC. Can that be used to construct?
No, I mean it's not feasible for these sorts of sculptures. No, I mean I can use it, but not for these. These are giant pieces of engineering, and they have to stand up, and the steelwork, has to each thickness. I mean, for example, with the BMW, they mentioned, oh, could we have it afterwards outside the factory? Now, if you imagine, here's your steel, and this is the deflection over a weekend, or over 2 weeks, or over a year. In good, that's fine, and you need this amount of steel. But if that deflection has to last for, say, 30 years, your steel is going to be this thick. So everything is engineered for duration, for loads, for everything. It's not a case of saying, well, it can be anything. It's got to work for its duration.
I think I'll just ask you another one or two questions because we're running out of time. There's one person who has asked about the Jacob's ladder, that it's been read about a story in the Bible. Could you tell us what was your inspiration behind this ladder?
Well, I'm Jewish, so my Hebrew name is Jacob. And it was a ladder structure, and it was the idea of the original Jacob's ladder story, where he dreams of ladder going up to heaven, and the angels and so forth. So it all somehow coalesced for me. So it was my ladder, but it was also the dream of this piece that goes up to the heavens. I think it was just as simple as that, really. I don't think there's any deeper meaning to it, but I think it worked very well.
Okay, I think we've run out of time, and I will email you the rest of the questions so that you could have a look at. So there are a lot more. So thank you so much, Gerry. It was the most wonderful evening that we have had. Thank you for your time, and I hope everyone has benefited. I'm sure everyone has benefited from today's talk.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to seeing what everybody's coming up with soon. Thank you very much. All the best to you all.